I worked nights at a logistics warehouse on the edge of town. The building sits alone on a flat stretch of industrial road. The parking lot surrounding it was designed for more traffic than it ever gets. There are about 20 light poles out there. 6 of them actually work. Those 6 cast just enough light to make the dark patches between them look deeper and wider than they are. My shift runs from 11 at night to 7 in the morning. I've worked that shift long enough that I stopped thinking of it as unusual. That is what routine does. It takes the strange and makes it feel ordinary. And when something feels ordinary, you stop watching it closely. You stop asking questions about it. It was a Tuesday in February. My coworker called out sick about 30 minutes before I left the house that night. That happened more often than it should have, so I drove in already knowing it would be just me for the full 8 hours. I was not worried about it. I had been alone in that building plenty of times before. I knew its sounds. I knew its layout. I had walked every row of that floor so many times I could do it in the dark. I parked in my usual spot beneath one of the working lot lights. The air outside was sharp and cold enough that my breath came out in thick, short bursts. I could feel it cutting through my jacket the moment I stepped out of the car. The lot was completely still. No wind. No cars passing on the road. Just a faint, low hum from the highway, about half a mile east, barely enough to notice. I stood there for a second. I looked at the building. Dark on the outside, which was normal. I keyed through the side entrance and went in. The building smells like rubber and old cardboard when the temperature drops. The heating system takes a solid hour to push any real warmth across the floor, so for that first stretch, I was walking around in my jacket with my hands in my pockets. I made a cup of coffee at the small station near the monitor desk. I sat down. I pulled up the inbound manifest for the next morning's delivery run. I had a pen. I had a bad cup of coffee going cold next to me. I was underlining things on the manifest and thinking about nothing except the job. Everything was exactly as it always was. I did my first floor walk at midnight. That is part of the role. Once every hour I walk the full warehouse floor and check for anything out of place. The floor is enormous. Metal shelving units run from one end of the building to the other in long, straight rows. Each row is marked with a letter. They go from A to M. The units climb about 30 feet off the ground. The overhead lights on the floor are motion activated. As I move down a row, they switch on in front of me. Behind me, one by one, they click back off. I have never liked that, not once. Every walk felt like moving inside a small, moving box of light, with darkness sealing up behind me at every step. I noticed that feeling again that night, the same as I always did, and I told myself to stop thinking about it. I finished the walk, nothing wrong. I went back to the desk. At around 1 in the morning, I heard a door. Not a slam or a bang slam. A soft, clean click. The kind of sound a fire door makes when it is pulled shut carefully by someone who does not want to make noise. I stopped typing. I did not move. I just sat there and listened. The building has 4 fire doors. One opens out to the loading dock at the rear of the building. The other 3 connect different sections of the interior floor. I counted to 20 in my head. Nothing else came. No follow-up sound, no movement. I told myself it was the temperature. Metal doors expand and contract in the cold. I had heard that sound 100 times before, and it had always been nothing. I picked up my pen and went back to the manifest. 4 minutes later, I heard footsteps. They were faint, not close and not moving toward me. They were somewhere to my left, deep in the shelving rows. The pattern was slow and uneven, not the kind of movement someone makes when they are walking from one place to another. It was the kind of movement someone makes when they are trying not to be heard. 2 steps, a pause, a shuffle, a longer pause, then 2 more steps. The sound had a careful, controlled quality to it that made my chest tighten in a way I could not immediately explain. I pulled up the security camera feeds on the monitor. We have 12 cameras covering the warehouse floor and 4 on the exterior. I went through them one at a time. The exterior cameras were clear. The interior cameras were mostly clear. Camera 9, which covers aisle G, had an obstruction in the middle of the frame. A pallet that had been moved earlier that day and never put back was sitting at an angle in the aisle. It created a dead zone in the camera view, a stretch of about 12 feet that the lens could not reach. The sound I heard had come from that exact part of the building. I called out. I said this was a restricted area and asked who was there. My voice stayed level. I do not know how. I picked up my radio and tried the overnight security monitoring line. It rang twice and connected to a recorded message. I left my location and extension and said I thought I had an unauthorized person inside the building. I sat very still after that, watching the monitor, watching the cameras. Nothing moved in any frame. Then I heard the shelving groan. It was a low metallic sound, the kind you hear when something heavy leans against one of the racks. Not a collapse, just slow pressure, sustained, like someone moving along the row using the shelving units to brace themselves instead of walking down the open floor, moving deliberately, moving in a way that kept them out of the camera angles. I stood up. I walked to the main overhead light control panel mounted at the far end of the monitor station wall. I hit every switch on the board. The fluorescent banks came on in sections across the entire floor, buzzing and flickering to life one row at a time, all the way from where I stood to the far wall of the building. I saw him at the end of aisle G. He was standing still. Dark jacket, hood up, facing away from me. He was not running. He was not moving at all, just standing there at the far edge of the aisle, where it opened toward the dock side of the building. I called out again, louder this time than it bit out. I told him this was a restricted facility and that he needed to leave. He turned his head, not his whole body, just his head, slowly, over his shoulder. He looked at me from roughly 80 feet away. The distance was enough that I could not make out the detail of his face. What I could read was the quality of the look. It was not surprise. It was not fear. It was completely flat, still, patient, like I had interrupted something he'd considered routine. Like I was the one out of place in that building. He turned and walked calmly toward the end of the row. He rounded the far corner in the direction of the dock doors and moved out of my line of sight. I did not follow. I went back to the station, locked the interior office door behind me, and called 911. Officers arrived in about 11 minutes. They found the loading dock door not forced, not damaged, just standing open about 3 inches. I had checked and locked that door at midnight during my walk. I was certain. One officer called me to aisle G after clearing the building. Behind the misplaced pallet, inside the exact stretch of floor the camera could not see, there was a folded dark blanket, 2 empty water bottles, a small pile of clothing tucked against the base of the shelving. Someone had set up a spot in there, in the one section of the entire floor that was not covered by any camera. That was not an accident. They had studied the layout. They had found the gap. They had chosen it on purpose and settled in. The officer told me there was no sign of forced entry anywhere on the building. No broken locks, no tampered doors. That meant he had walked in through a regular entrance at some point during regular business hours and had stayed hidden until I arrived. The officer said I should check the perimeter before entering every night going forward. He said it like it was simple advice, like adding one step to a morning routine. I still work the same shift. I still walk the same floor, but I hit every overhead light before I take a single step onto the warehouse floor. Every time. Without exception. Because I know now that darkness in a place you think you know is not empty. Sometimes it has already been there for hours, waiting for you to feel comfortable enough to stop looking. She took the job at the 24-hour pharmacy because the hours made sense around her life. Her daughter had school in the morning. She needed midday for drop-off and pickup. The overnight shift covered the gap, midnight to 6, 3 nights a week, while her mother stayed at the house. It was not a perfect arrangement. She knew that, but the pay was good, and the benefits were real, and those 2 things outweighed the inconvenience of driving through a dead city at 11:30 at night. The pharmacy was a standalone building inside a strip mall on a commercial road. None of the other units in the strip ran past 9, so from midnight onward, her window was the only lit space in a long row of dark storefronts. The parking lot held about 60 cars during the day. At night, it was empty except for her own vehicle sitting under a single working light near the front. She had noted that detail when she first started. The way her car looked alone out there, she told herself it was fine. She had told herself that enough times that she stopped thinking about it. She worked there for close to 4 months before anything happened. The first time she saw him, she was restocking the cold and flu section near the front windows. It was around 1 in the morning on a Wednesday. She was reaching up to push boxes back into alignment on the top shelf when she turned and looked through the glass. A man was standing at the far edge of the parking lot, near the point where the lot light faded out. He had his hands in his jacket pockets. He was facing the building. She looked at him for a few seconds and decided he was waiting for a ride. Maybe he had just picked something up. She went back to the shelf. She did not think about it again that night. She saw him again 3 nights later. She noticed him through the same window, in the same spot, in the same posture, hands in pockets, facing the store. She mentioned it to the pharmacist on duty. He looked out the window and said it was probably nothing, maybe someone who liked to walk at night. She agreed and moved on. She did not see him for about a week after that. She thought the whole thing had resolved itself. Then he was at the window, not in the parking lot this time, not at a distance. He was standing at the right edge of the front window, pressed slightly to the side of it, rather than directly in front. Far enough to the side that you would only spot him if you happened to be looking in that specific direction at that specific angle. He was not looking at the products in the window. He was looking through the glass of the registers, at the counter, at her. She felt it drop through her the moment she registered what she was seeing. Not a thought, a physical reaction. Her stomach tightened and her hands went cold, and she looked away from the window before she had consciously decided to. She moved to the back of the pharmacy and picked up a tray of prescription labels and kept herself busy at the dispensing counter. From that position, she could see the exterior security monitor mounted above the pickup window. The camera covering the front lot captured most of the parking area and the main entrance. But the right corner of the building, where he had been standing, sat just outside the edge of the frame. She realized that as she looked, the spot he had chosen was not covered. She called the regional overnight manager on duty. She told him a man had been watching her through the front window. She gave the details calmly. The manager asked if the man had entered the building. She said no. He said to call the police if the man came inside. She put the phone down and stood behind the counter for a moment without moving. She checked the monitor. The lot looked clear. The front of the building was empty in the camera frame. She waited. 10 minutes. Then 15. She watched the screen and told herself he had left. She needed to confirm the front door deadbolt was set. She had engaged it at midnight as she always did, but she wanted to see it with her own eyes. She walked to the front. She reached out toward the deadbolt. It was locked. She straightened up and looked through the glass. He was standing directly on the other side of the door, not in the lot, not at the side of the window, right there at the glass. His face was close enough to the door that she could see the texture of his jacket collar. He was looking directly at her. His expression was completely still. No reaction to her being there, no surprise. He raised one hand slowly and placed one finger flat against the glass. He held it there. She stepped backward. She did not run. She walked to the back counter at a controlled pace, lifted the store phone, and dialed 911. She gave the address in a low, even voice. She said a man had been watching her on multiple occasions over several weeks and was now standing at the locked front entrance, pressing his hand against the glass. The dispatcher told her to move away from the front of the store and stay on the line. She crouched behind a dispensing counter. She kept her eyes on the monitor. The parking lot camera showed nothing. The front entrance showed nothing. Police arrived in 7 minutes. They found no one. No man. No vehicle in the surrounding area matching any description. They cleared the exterior and came inside. One officer asked to see the exterior camera setup. She showed them the monitor and explained what it covered. The officer went outside and walked the perimeter of the building. She came back inside 2 minutes later and asked who had access to the side emergency exit. That exit was on the wall of the building, not visible from any camera. The officer had found a strip of clear tape over the door's sensor casing. Not a lot of tape. A small, precise piece placed over the sensor contact point. It would prevent the alarm from triggering if the door was pushed from the outside. It had been placed there by someone who knew where the sensor was located, someone who had gotten close enough to the building to study it, not in the dark, in daylight, at some point before she had ever noticed him in the lot at night. She never worked to that location again. She transferred to a store on the other side of the city within 2 weeks. She told most people the commute was shorter. That was easier than explaining. She still does the same thing every time she parks anywhere alone at night. She scans the lot before she gets out of the car. She checks who is standing still and where and whether they are facing toward her or away. She does it automatically now, without thinking. The way you check both ways before stepping off a curb. The tape over the sensor is the detail she cannot let go of. He had known exactly where it was. He had gone looking for it. He had planned around a system she had trusted without ever questioning it, and she never found out whether the badge he wore on that lanyard, the one she caught a glimpse of in the second before she stepped away from the door, was real or not. I was the opening key holder at a small commercial print shop. We handled business cards, large format banners, blueprints, that kind of work. 3 employees total. I was the only one with a key to the building. My shift started at 5:30 in the morning. That gave me time to get the machines warmed up, pull the day's orders, and have everything staged before the 9 o'clock rush. My other 2 coworkers came in 8:45. That gap between 5:30 and 8:45 was my time. 3 hours and 15 minutes alone in a quiet building on a dark road before the rest of the world caught up. I had been doing it for almost a year. That is long enough that the whole routine becomes completely automatic. Drive in, park, key the front door, hit the lights, start the warm-up sequence on the main printer, make coffee, pull yesterday's pending orders. I did not have to think about any of it. My hands just did it while my brain was somewhere else. The shop sits inside a small business park on a quiet stretch of road. No foot traffic. No neighboring businesses open before 9. In the summer that was fine because it was already getting light by 5:30. But in January, 5:30 in the morning is completely dark. The lot lights on the property ran on a timer and switched off at 6:30 regardless of the time of year. That meant by 6:30, the only light visible anywhere in that business park was the white fluorescent glow coming out through our front window. Everything else was black. It was a Tuesday in January. I had a large blueprint job due that morning. I was thinking about the run count during the whole drive-in. That is the kind of small, specific work problem that fills your head on an early commute and crowds out everything else. I parked, I got out of the car. The air was sharp and cold in a way that January in that city always delivered. I walked to the front door. I put the key in the lock. I stepped inside and reached for the light panel on the left wall, the same way I had done it every single morning for close to a year. The backlights were already on. I stopped moving immediately. My hand was still raised toward the panel. The front of the shop was dark because I had not touched the switch yet. But through the half wall that separated the retail counter from the production floor behind it, I could see light, white fluorescent light, fully on, steady. The production area lights were running, and I had not turned them on. I stood in the doorway for a moment and went through the explanation in my head. I must have left them on. But I had not closed the night before. My coworker had closed. She was thorough. She never left anything running. She had never once left a light on. I knew that, and I stood there knowing it, and I still told myself there had to be a simple answer. I stepped fully inside. I let the front door close behind me. I know now that was the wrong call. At the time, I was not ready to accept what my gut was already telling me. I stood behind the front counter and listened. The building was quiet. The large format printers were off. The warm-up sequence had not been started. The coffee machine was cold. Everything on the retail side was exactly as I would expect it at 5:30 in the morning, but those backlights were on, and someone had turned them on, and it was not me. There was a smell in the building. I noticed it standing there behind the counter. Not a strong smell, not a chemical smell, just a quality of air in a room that has had a person breathing in it for a long time. The way a closed space smells different after hours of occupancy. Warm, slightly thick. You would not notice it if you were not paying attention. I was paying attention. I called out. I said my coworker's name. I asked if anyone was there. My voice came out too loud for the quiet of the building. Nothing answered. I backed up slowly to the front counter. I picked up the desk phone and called 911. I kept my voice low and steady. I gave the address. I said I believed there was someone inside my workplace who should not be there. I told the dispatcher the backlights were on and had not been turned on by me, and that the building had been locked since the previous evening. I told her I could smell that someone had been in there for a while. I felt like that last part sounded strange. I said it anyway because it was true. She told me to go outside and wait by my car. I did. I stood in the cold parking lot for about 6 minutes. I kept my eyes on the front window. Nothing moved inside the lit back area that I could see from where I stood. 2 police units pulled into the lot. I unlocked the front door for them and stayed outside while they went through the building. It took 4 minutes. One officer came back out and asked me to come inside and look at something, without touching anything. He walked me through the production floor to the storage room at the very back of the building. The door was standing open. The room is used for paper stock, ink supply boxes, and spare parts for the machines. It is not a room that customers ever see or that I spend much time in during the day. Against the back wall of that room, there was a sleeping bag, unrolled and laid out flat. A small battery-powered lantern sat on the floor next to it, switched off. There was a backpack nearby with the zipper open. Inside the backpack there was a plastic bag holding a half-eaten sandwich and an unopened water bottle. And at the edge of the sleeping bag, placed neatly side by side, toes pointed toward the door, there was a pair of boots. The officer told me that whoever had been in that room had heard me come in through the front and had gone out through the back emergency exit. The exit bar on that door had been manipulated. The latch mechanism had been worked in a way that allowed the door to be opened from the outside without triggering the alarm. That was not something you figured out by accident. You'd have to spend time on it, study it. They searched the surrounding area outside and found no one. The officer asked me when I had last been in that storage room. I told him I had not gone in there in at least 3 or 4 days. He did not say much after that. He wrote things down. There was no sign of forced entry anywhere on the building. Every door was intact. Every lock was intact. Every lock was intact. That meant whoever this person was, they had come in through a normal entrance at some point during business hours. They had found that storage room. They had picked that space and set themselves up in it and stayed through an entire night while the building sat locked and dark around them. I thought about my coworker closing up the previous evening, walking through the shop, turning off the production lights. That room door had been closed. She had no reason to open it. She had probably walked past it without a second thought, the same way I would have. I thought about every other morning I had come in before that one. The mornings I had made coffee and pulled orders and moved around that building completely alone, or so I had believed. The times I had walked through the production floor and past that closed storage room door without giving it a single thought. I had no idea how many of those mornings had actually been the same as this one. The boots are the detail I keep coming back to, set down neatly, side by side, toes toward the door. That is not something a panicked person does. That is someone who planned to be there. Someone who expected to wake up quietly, pack their things, and be gone before I noticed a single thing. Someone who had calculated the whole situation carefully, including me, and had simply not expected me to stop at the light panel the way I did. I still work the same job. I still open the building, but I check that storage room first. Every morning, before I start the printers, before I make coffee, before I do anything else. I open that door and I look inside, not because I expect to find something, because I know now that expecting to find nothing is not the same as being safe.